Hey, it's Brian Burns. Welcome to this episode of the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. One of the things that we all have to do at one time or another, or it may be even our job, is to build a presentation about what we do, what we care about, what our customers do with our product, or just to update people on how things are going with the business. Now, this can be a daunting event if you're not used to it, and people tend to do the death by PowerPoint, which really kind of ruins the whole point of it. Today, I've got a great guy on, one of the evangelists from Prezi that I've partnered with. He's going to share his story and what he recommends. We're going to talk over the issues about how do you go about doing this? How do you convey that value using both visuals and storytelling? And how do you build it up? What do you avoid? All the mistakes that people make. I think you're really going to get into this. It's going to be a lot of fun. Also, at the end, I'll update you on the courses that are going on, and make sure you're checking out Prezi Business at Prezi.com. Prezi Business gives you the capability to keep track of those presentations that you're sending around, see where people are forwarding them to, how far are they getting, seeing what's resonating, what's not. And it gives your salespeople that capability and control about when people are opening them so that they can know when to follow up, and they know how far people have gone through it, and they get a sense of how interested they are. Also, coming up in the next couple of weeks, I'll be interviewing somebody who's done $1 million deal using Nudge.ai. You can't miss that one. So keep an eye out for that on the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. So let's get into the interview. Hey, David, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Thank you very much, Brian. Where to begin? So I'm the lead evangelist and head of creative services over at Prezi. Which is the cloud-based presentation tool that's changing the way over 100 million people are doing presentations, moving away from slide-based presentations and moving towards somewhere where we can put all of your content into a cohesive whole on a canvas that you can dynamically move around, and as a consequence have a presentation that's going to be better for you and easier on your audience as well.
Excellent. How'd you get interested in this?
That's a good question. I think in a way, everybody is interested in presenting. I'm certain that, especially for the audience of people listening to this podcast, a lot of them have to do presenting quite regularly. So if you do something, you are by nature of that interested in it. And I, like anyone else, found myself doing a lot of presentations in my previous life in a different job. I've been here 6 years now, so it really does seem like a lifetime away. But yeah, that's how I become interested in presentations. If you've ever done something like watch a TED talk or listen to someone tell a story in a pub, you are interested in presenting or storytelling or having someone communicate an idea to you. It takes up a lot of our day. So I think if you were to trace it all the way back, I've been interested since I first stood up in front of my class in middle school and did a book report, I think.
Yeah. And are you naturally an extrovert, or are you an introvert, or?
I would suggest that probably people would label me as an extrovert, and I think there's definitely the association that extroverts are a bit better with public speaking. I don't know if it's necessarily a truth, though, or perhaps just a truism. If you were to look through TED's library of people that speak, you'll find there's quite a few introverts in there who do good talks, and there's even a great TED talk on the value of introverts. Also, being an extrovert and someone who, I think there are people in the office who just tell you I talk too much, but
that's a different category, huh?
It is, but it's close. I would say that just because you are extroverted and comfortable talking to people doesn't mean you're any more comfortable talking to people on stage. I have given a lot of talks. Evangelizing a piece of software which is for presenting, I should be able to get up and give a talk, right? But that doesn't mean that I feel any more comfortable or I don't get nervous. It's just that I perhaps and other people like me have a little bit more experience of where to channel that energy once you get it.
Yeah. And what is the process that you take people through when you meet them? Do you work your way backwards against their objective, or do you take an assessment of what they're doing currently, or do you just have a conversation with them?
That kind of depends on where they kind of come into the conversation. If they're completely new to Prezi, I like to do a thing where I ask them the simple question of whether or not they have a kitchen. I mean, Brian, do you have a kitchen?
I happen to have a kitchen, yes.
Excellent. I did once ask this question to someone who didn't have a kitchen. It was a very awkward moment.
Yeah.
And we couldn't go any further. But do you have stuff in your kitchen?
I have lots of stuff in my kitchen.
Could you name me some of the things that you have in your kitchen?
I have a coffee maker. I have a refrigerator, a microwave, too many computers that should be in the kitchen.
A well-stocked kitchen you've got there. Interestingly, no food.
I am a bachelor. Yeah.
A well-stocked kitchen. And when you were constructing that list so that you could relate it back to me, how were you doing that in your head?
I was picturing it.
Yeah, you were picturing it. And that's the way in which Prezi works. We tap into that. You remember the coffee maker, and so you remember what was next to the coffee maker.
Exactly.
So everyone who's even a little bit familiar with memory champions and the way they work know that they use this memory palace, or sometimes it's called the method of loci way of remembering things, where not only do you associate something with a visual, slides can associate what you're doing with a visual, but you also place those visuals in a sequence or arrangement whereby you can easily remember them. And that's what Prezi, that's the power that Prezi is tapping into, is that we help you position your ideas or objects or visuals or whatever it is that you want people to look at in a way that they make sense as a cohesive whole. You can move around them dynamically and see them. So that's one exercise. Getting back to your question, which I know I've gone a bit long-winded, but getting back to your question, that's one thing that I do to kind of introduce them to Prezi. If they're familiar with it, our process because what my team does is help people get better at presenting. So that can be starting with the narrative, but also we really come into play with the visuals and building that great Prezi presentation for them to use up on stage. So if they are familiar with it, I usually kind of take them through our process, which is to have a look at their content, brainstorm, see what fits with it in terms of a visual style. The visual metaphor that goes behind someone's talk is a very important thing for us. So we spend quite a bit of time exploring that. On the most simplistic level, a visual metaphor that I can think of is, I don't know, if you were telling a story or giving a presentation about a difficult thing that you did, and you want people to see that, you know, you started out at A and you got to B and you had various struggles along the way, we'd use a visual metaphor perhaps like of going up a mountain, where you start at the bottom of the mountain and you get to the top of the mountain and there's all these trials and tribulations that happen in between. So figuring out what that visual metaphor is a key part of our process.
And so that sounds really interesting, because I did study memory improvement, and they called it pegging or anchoring and NLP, and it is very powerful. When you pick out these visuals, is there a particular methodology you use, or is it just a back and forth process?
Oh, I should probably think of a name for it. It's the kind of blanket. The blanket approach, and we look at as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
People tend to have visual styles that resonate with them. So we'll ask our speakers if there's a particular visual style that they like. People at least tend to have an opinion over whether they prefer to be illustrative or photographic. And then we use all different kinds of places to resource our images, but we just have a look through. It's a part of the process we invest a lot of time in, and we're happy to invest a lot of time in. It's kind of like choosing your TV channel when you're flicking through cable. Not that anyone does that anymore, I guess, but you know, if you can remember back to those days before Netflix, and you would, you know, perhaps turn on the TV and there's a show that you like, but you're kind of wondering what else is on the other channels, and you flick through. Mm-hmm. We kind of take that approach to image hunting. We try to be as comprehensive. And it might sound, I guess, like potentially not an efficient use of time, but generally speaking, we like to look through as many visuals as possible because we always want to be inspired. And we might come across something we don't use this time, but we definitely do use next time.
And what would you say that the top three things are that people are doing wrong when you tend to review their current approach? Is it that they're talking too many features and benefits, list of topics, trying to communicate too much, not going through a journey?
I think the number one thing, and if I could get rid of anything when it comes to presentations, is the general approach that people take to them. This is not true for everyone, but a lot of people still that I work with, even giving big presentations in big places, they take a very apathetic approach towards their presentation. Presenting or publicly speaking is commonly listed in the top 10 fears that people have.
Yeah.
I've seen polling results that show that public speaking is more feared than death, which is completely illogical, because literally the worst thing that can happen to you on stage is that you die. So it can't be worse. Doesn't make any sense. So what happens, I think, as a result of that is a lot of people take this approach of, well, if I can just get up there and not embarrass myself and get off without everybody hating me or thinking I was terrible, then I would have done a good job. But actually, you haven't done a good job, because all you've done is kind of added yourself to the vast list of boring, monotonous presentations that just fade into the ether and no one remembers. Okay, you've avoided the absolute worst thing, which is to have everyone laugh at you for your ineptitude, but that's kind of unlikely to happen anyway. Most audiences, in fact, the majority of all audiences that I've ever come across, want you to succeed, right? They've taken the time to pay for a ticket or travel or just take time out of their day to sit down and listen to you. They want you to do a good job. So treat that with, as an opportunity. Think of it as a way to progress and do better, and a chance to impress people, and take a couple of risks, even if that risk is just to, I'm not going to be safe. I'm going to find a new and interesting way to present this information, because the safety first approach, let's not rock the boat, is in a way failing. So that would be the number one thing that I would like everybody to change about the way they do presentations.
I think that is true, very true, in that people kind of hide behind facts or studies or the podium.
Yeah.
And people are scared to, use comedy or drama or adventure, the classic topics that we all, get emotionally attached to. Because it is kind of a transfer of emotion, isn't it?
Absolutely. I've got lots of bugbears and pet peeves about this. We could go on for a long time. I won't bore you with all of them. But I think one of the ones that kind of gets me every time is when people get up and say, so I'm not very good at presenting. And it's like, well, if you're not good, what are you doing there?
Thanks for wasting our time. Yeah.
Well, and also, you also kind of tell the audience, hey, guys, this is going to be depressing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, can you think there are plenty of other things that we do in life where you wouldn't dare lower everyone's expectations before you start off on something? Like, movies don't start with a pre-credit sequence that says, hey, guys, this is not very good. Like, it's pretty bad. Don't even bother. Like, come on.
And what's your feeling about taking people through like an analogous audience adventure or case study? Is that the best way, or is it more to use drama or comedy to convey the point?
I don't think there's one solution fits all. It really kind of depends on you and your content. But there are certainly different devices and things that you can use. Centering your story around a personal story. I think the vast majority of talks, especially in a business setting, are looking for some kind of empathy.
Yeah.
You want the person you're speaking to empathize with the problem or with your solution to the problem. So you want to very quickly establish why they should be listening and how you're either someone who feels their pain or you're someone who's been through their pain. Like, you're on their side, you're one and together. So personal stories can do that. Really good talks often start in the anecdotal. Like, I actually did a TEDx talk last year, and I'm talking about something which is a broad topic, which is visual literacy. But I didn't start with visual literacy and giving a definition. I talked about a single instance of how it was important. And if you were to analyze it, it's a single instance. It's one time. It was me in a bar, but it
that wasn't one time. Come on.
Well, no, I mean, that's definitely not one time. But But it in itself is, in the grand scheme of things, not important. Visual literacy in the grand scheme of things, at least the case I was trying to make, is important. But if you start in an anecdotal case that people can relate to, you're going to get them on your side. And then you can talk about broad strokes and bigger pictures because people are with you. So I think getting people on your side early on in the talk, and like you already mentioned, for example, comedy, great way to do that. Drama, great way to do that. And then once people are with you, you will be given license to do quite a few things. I mean, look at something like Game of Thrones or House of Cards or whatever it is you binge watch. Those are 12, 13 hour, people are consuming those at 4, 5, 6 hours a night. And they're doing that because early on they get you on side. They hook you in, and then they can kind of ramble and go off in directions. I was watching Westworld on Sunday, and not to spoil it for anyone, but it is, wow, off the reservation now. Like, all over the place. I'm struggling to keep up with who's doing what and where's going, blah, blah. But I'm still watching because that early bit really, they really got me. Their key concepts, the connection that they're looking for me to make is very keenly established early on.
And that is good, and it clearly works. But in the context of like business, what's the science behind it as far as like how much time do we really have? What's the build up? What should the close be? What's your thoughts on that part?
The science will kind of tell you different things, and you can interpret it. I mean, there is the argument that you have 8 seconds, right? You have 8-second attention span. If you don't say something in those first 8 seconds, you're kind of done for. I think it's a little bit more than that because people are sympathetic, but certainly it's true in the first 30 seconds or so, you want to do something that grabs and keeps people's attention.
Yeah.
How long exactly that attention span is, I think is a little bit up for debate. What's not up for debate is that it's getting shorter.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's actually, I think that's a little bit of a myth in that it's not getting shorter. What's changing is the competition is getting higher.
Yes.
So right now, rather than listen to me or you, people have a whole world of content in their hands, literally, like things like Twitter, Facebook, all of these different feeds where we're getting information. Right now, rather than listen to us, there's a whole world of potentially more interesting things out there. So the difference is now that you have to be interesting, you have to grab people's attention because they've got an alternative, right? Thumb twiddling is not the second choice to listening to your conversation. Checking your Twitter feed or messaging someone is. So I don't want to say that the whole human society is, moving towards goldfish-sized brains. It's clearly not happening. Where, Hyperloop is going to send people from one side of the country to the other in 30 minutes or whatever it is. We are advancing as a set of people, but the problem is that the competition, what you're up against, is tougher than before, and so you have to up your game.
Yeah. So in general, would you recommend making your presentation super tight and trying to keep it more like a TED Talk than the classic hour-long meeting?
I would encourage you to perhaps not worry too much about time and worry about being interesting.
Yes.
Like if you can be interesting for 45 minutes, be interesting for 45 minutes. It's a challenge. I'm telling you right now, that's a long time to be interesting for. But I think it's a good indicator if your presentation is running 45 minutes to ask yourself, is all of this interesting? Probably not, right? But I would make that my primary question of not, am I going too long, but am I interesting?
And how about the outcome of the presentation? What is a reasonable objective as far as that? Is it to communicate value? Is it to have people move to the next step? Is it to spur conversation? Is it all of that?
All of those things are possible. I think what you need to do is decide on which one you want to provoke up front. And I would try and stick with one. Yeah. Like, what is it? What is the one thing that you want people to do? And that can be you want them to take an action. It can be that you want them to think slightly differently. It can be that you want them to ask a follow-up question. But work out in advance what that one thing is. I think that's a pitfall that I, for myself, fall into on occasion when putting together a presentation is I don't stop to think, okay, what do I want the audience to do? We all kind of, it's a trap to fall into, how do I want the audience to perceive me? That's a question you need to ask, but it's not the first question. The first question is, what do I want them to do when I'm done?
Okay. And once you have that, let's say it's attend a conference or commit to a next step, then do you work backwards from that, or do you just keep that in mind?
Yeah. No, totally. You work backwards from that. What are my tools to get them there?
Yeah. Okay.
What are my arguments? What are my visuals? What are my persuasion points? What are my stories that are going to convince them of that?
And, can you give us an example of the journey that you've taken a client through that you're really passionate about?
Oh, there's so many, and and quite often the information is confidential or private. I'm trying to think.
We don't need names or anything.
Yeah, there's one where, I mean, and this is a guy who basically his job is to persuade people to use a certain way of constructing. He's in the construction industry.
Yep.
And he's a deeply passionate man who really, really genuinely cares about how concrete is used, which is great. I think he's the only one, but it's great that he does. What we kind of had to persuade him to do is to start with that stuff, the passion stuff, like the story of, he has a story of being kind of out in the Appalachian Trail and looking at these kind of old out of date bridges and how he thought that they were beautiful, but it was horrible. They weren't being used anymore. And to start with that stuff, he thought that stuff was too personal and that he didn't want to go in. But we were like, no, if you start there, people are going to see that passion. That passion is infectious. And people are going to want to go with you because, you've got that charisma and belief and people find that attractive. So that was a journey that we went on. A common thing that we do with a lot of clients is work with them on the segmentation of their narrative and of their content. People tend to just kind of open up a PowerPoint and just write down everything. And what you actually really should be doing is thinking of, I'm starting here. I want to get everybody to there. What are the things that I can take, that I can give them to get them there? What order do I put them in? Is this one more important than the other? Does this one come underneath this one? Which, if you do that, then gives you the option to skip over the ones because you're going to okay, I'm 5 minutes into this. They're loving this stuff, but that other stuff, I don't think it's going to resonate. But because I've constructed my visuals in such a way, I'm going to be able to skip past that really easily. It's going to make sense.
And do you see people trying to stuff too much in? I worked with or interviewed a Prezi consultant who didn't work for Prezi, but was an independent agency. And he really believed in this power of three. It's don't try and communicate more than 3 to 5 topics in the presentation.
I think that's a good guideline. And I like to think of those things as guidelines rather than rules, because if you get, rules can mean that you genuinely leave something out that's great. But I think to go back to the original part of your question, I think the temptation to put in more is always a big one, because everything that you've done on a project, let's say you're presenting on a project that you've done, everything that you've done means something to you because you've spent time on it. Yeah. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean something to your audience always. And so you do kind of have to be prepared to let stuff go. Although I would say it's easier to cut than to create. So if you've got an idea or something you want to put in, include it in the early planning stage of your presentation, but just be prepared to cut anything.
And as far as, using vocabulary, do you find that that's probably the number 2 thing is they start using their own vocabulary, their own acronyms, their own language, instead of, breaking it down so that the mere mortals could understand it if they just looked at it for the first time or even unattended?
Yeah, I wouldn't be quite sure where to rank that, but that's definitely a big no-no. Like, I mean, it's language, I think, is the key word that you've used there. If you're using acronyms and language that people don't understand, you might as well be giving your presentation in Swahili. Like, I mean, if people don't speak that language, they're not gonna know.
That's it, because I see a lot of decks, and I'm like, I look through that, and I still don't know what you do, or even web pages, right? You're like,
yeah. I think though, I don't want to say it's the opposite, but often I see not just acronyms and terms that I don't know, but also over elaborate sentences that you could relate back to someone really simply, like, but there's this need to kind of decorate our language around what we do to try and make ourselves feel more important. That's super frustrating for an audience to sit through. Like, if the audience is sat there thinking, yeah, okay, what you're doing is just X. Stop calling it X, Y, differentially B, C, D. Like, just let it go.
Yeah.
Call it what it is.
And I don't know if you're a fan of Casey Neistat's or not, but he really breaks like storytelling and presenting down to like 3 steps. It's like he has like the setup, and then the dilemma, and then the resolution. Is it that simple, or is he making it overly simple?
So first thing to say about Casey is I know he's a Prezi user.
Oh, cool.
He goes out and gives talks using Prezi. So I think that's definitely a thing for which we should respect him. He's also a great storyteller. I don't want to say his way is the only way, but for him, I would encourage you to go. If people don't know who he is, go check out his YouTube channel, because he's got fantastic stories and storytelling on there. And if that's working for him so well, it could work for you so well. I don't say it's the one, but it's definitely an effective one, judging by the quality of his output.
Yeah, and you got to also understand his medium is, a 5-minute YouTube video. And you talk about distraction. YouTube is like... It's like one of those laser lights for cats, It's like you got 17 different choices and everything.
Yes, and a powerful algorithm that's learning about how you consume it and taking you down the rabbit hole, for sure.
Yeah. So what advice would you leave people with as far as taking their current approach and making it better? Where should they go and learn more about you, your abilities, and Prezi's capabilities?
So for Prezi, it's really simple. It's www.prezi.com. So that's PREZI.com. If anyone wants to reach out to me, they can do. I respond to every request that's sent to me on LinkedIn. So that's just David Hooker Prezi. You can find it on LinkedIn. And for what people should change about their current approach is treat that presentation as an opportunity to be excellent and not a potential to completely mess up.
And how often should we review our approach and in our deck and what we do? Is it like, once a quarter? Is it once a year? How often do you
Every
do
time
it?
Before you give it.
Yeah.
I mean, you should be asking that question before you give every presentation is this the right presentation for these people in the room?
Yeah, I love that. Hey, I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that interview with David. He's a great guy. Connect with him on LinkedIn and make sure you go to Prezi.com and download their free ebook or get an eval copy and talk to them about Prezi Business. It's really a game changer for your sales and marketing team to really get a sense of how do you build a compelling presentation that is the way people think. It zooms in and zooms out, that flows naturally, has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then you get to track it so that you can get a sense of their level of interest and engagement. And then your sales reps can follow up appropriately from that. So check that out. And also you check out Gong.io. Gong.io just did some rebranding, and they've got some great ebooks on discovery calls, as well as cold calling analysis. They really have broken down the inside sales role into a science. And I really have built that into my sales development course called Start the Conversation, Get the Meeting. And I also have a special course for business development reps and sales development reps for both marketing and sales. The first graduates will be out in the end of July. So if you're looking to hire people who are already trained, already skilled, already experienced, and really eager to get started, just let me know. Connect up with me on LinkedIn, Brian G. Burns on LinkedIn. Really appreciate that. If just tell somebody about the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast, I appreciate that. Also, if you're getting stuck getting those meetings, I can help you there. Teach your team if you'd like. If your salespeople are getting stuck in the complex sale because it's becoming more and more complex, I'll show them exactly how to have more control, how to get the deals done on time and bigger than you anticipated. That course is called Closing the Complex Sale. Also, I got a free ebook on how companies buy and make product selections. Now, all you have to do to get this is go to b2brevenue.com and just enter your email address and hit submit, and it'll send you basically a HTML page, and you just click download the ebook. So it doesn't send you the book. It sends you a link to the book. The book is on Box, and it's a PDF file. It's kind of big to email around, so I let people just click on it. All I need is your email address. That's it. I don't spam. Haven't sent one out yet. Not yet. Might do it like once a quarter. That's about it. Really appreciate everybody listening in today. Check out the website. If you happen to see me on LinkedIn, I'd really appreciate a like, comment, or a share. And thanks for listening.